The 10 objections. Objection number 8. Christians are bigots. What is a bigot? A bigot is someone who is intolerant of other people, is narrow-minded in their views, judgemental, and condemning of all those that do not agree with them. But that could be anyone. That creates a problem because under that definition, every worldview could be labelled with that charge. An atheist can be bigoted against a Christian, a Muslim against a Hindu. So the term itself is not that useful when used as a way to name call. So let us define it a little bit better. A bigot is someone who is intolerant of other people's views and wishes them harm if they do not agree with them and are not willing to change their views. So what about Christians who critique a lifestyle or a belief system? Are they not being bigots? Now, some Christians behave in a bigoted way, but that is inconsistent with the teachings of Christianity. So the real question we need to ask is, are the fundamental teachings of Christianity bigoted? Christians rely on the Bible for their moral positions. They rely on revelation from God to determine what is right and what is wrong. So if they perceive something to be harmful to an individual or to society based on God's moral standards, they are required to express that. And if that is something that someone else disagrees with, then the Christian is in danger of being labelled a bigot, citing intolerance as the motivation for their position. So is God a bigot? If that view is indeed intolerant, then the accusation is really that God is intolerant, as a Christian is not originating the idea. So is God a bigot? The central question then is this: is God seeking to harm humankind, or is God seeking to benefit humankind? Think about it like this. If a parent warns their child against certain immoral activities, are they being bigoted? Is it wrong for them to say, this is not good for you, and it is not good for the rest of society? Of course not. We expect moral guidance from our parents. So if we cry out and say bigot every time we're presented with something that we don't agree with, then how is that any different to a child sulking and sticking their lip out with crossed arms? It is very important to understand how Christians view moral issues. All mankind has an inclination to sin, break God's law. Sin is damaging to the individual and society, emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. Sin has to be identified to be dealt with. Sinners should be treated with gentleness and respect. Restoration back into relationship with God and freedom from sin is the end objective. If a Christian believes that someone is doing something that is harmful to the individual or society, should they point that out? A mature Christian will always deal with any moral issue from the position of restoration, of improving the lives of those around them, and that will be the focus of their influence in society. If that is the case, can they then be accused of being a bigot? Shouting bigot is often bigotry itself. The very use of the word bigot can become an act of bigotry if it is used to shout down an opposing viewpoint that does not mean harm. It can be used as an intellectually lazy and emotional way to try to silence an opponent. So we have to be very careful when we see it being used. So the question then becomes, does the Christian have the moral authority to point out issues in society? If it is a moral standard that God has communicated to mankind, which he created, then yes, indeed they do. But if not, then no, they don't. One of the objections tied to the charge of bigotry is that of Christianity causing wars. We have to remember that God's people were directed to go to war in their history, but that was always in extreme cases against nations that were practicing and promoting behavior that was evil to its core and had been warned by God to stop, and allowing it to continue would cause untold amounts of suffering to innocents. But war that is focused on gain, on murder, on stealing, that is never supported in the Bible. There are also Christians and churches that have promoted war under the guise of Christianity to further their own ends, but that is not consistent with biblical teaching. Another thing to note is this, is that war happens whether religion, Christianity, or any other worldview is involved or is not involved. Look at the communist governments that promoted and encouraged atheism. They have an atrocious record when it comes to warmongering. So if you want to get rid of war completely, you have to remove sin completely. So are Christians bigots? If Christians are genuinely following the teachings of Christ in the Bible, and the goal is the restoration and the well-being of the individual and society as a whole, then the charge of bigotry can only be considered to be false.